My 2-year-old is way better at following directions than my 5 and 7-year-olds. And while I'd love to brag that she's just a genius, it's actually because every time I give her an instruction, I use the 6 steps that I'm going to walk you through in this video. Now, I know it might sound complicated to go through a whole process every time you want to give your toddler an instruction, but don't worry, it's actually really easy to do. So the first step, and probably the most important, is to get your toddler to focus on you, which can be a challenge in itself because whether they're building a block tower or studying a bug crawling across the floor, they become completely immersed in whatever they're doing. And while this deep focus is amazing for their development, it makes it a little tricky when we need them to shift gears and listen. Which is why words just aren't enough. It takes more than just calling their name from across the room. We also need to physically enter their world in order to gain their full attention. And the way to do this is to just walk over to them, crouch down to their eye level and place your hand on them. Now, it really doesn't matter where you put your hand. It could be on their hand, their shoulder, or their leg. What's important is that you make that physical connection. Then say their name and wait for them to look up at you. At this point, you have their attention. Now the challenge is keeping it for long enough to actually give them the instruction, which is where step 2 comes in. This is where you literally become a human shield. So while maintaining that physical connection, position yourself strategically to block out any potential distractions. So for example, whenever I'm giving my toddler a direction, if her siblings are in the same room playing, I'll position myself so that she can't actually see them. Or if our golden retriever is in the house, often he wants to get in on the action whenever I crouch down, so I'll try and block him so he's not a distraction. Now, I know this might sound a little over the top, but remember, to a toddler, everything is new, exciting, and incredibly distracting. You're literally competing with everything around them for their attention. So that means the more you can actually minimize potential distractions, the better your chances of getting them to pay attention to you and then follow your directions. Better yet, if you can, also turn off any screens or background noises. This way your toddler can actually focus on you and hear what you're saying. Now you've got their full attention, it's time for step 3, which is to give the direction. And there are 2 key components here. The first is what you say. The difference between a toddler who follows through and one who ignores you often comes down to the complexity of the directions. So there are 3 important things that I want you to keep in mind when you are deciding what to say. First, avoid phrasing directions as questions. So for example, can you pick up your ball? This gives your toddler the impression that they have a choice. And if they're feeling independent, as toddlers often do, they might respond with a firm no. Instead, clearly and directly tell your toddler what to do. For example, Tom, pick up your ball. This sets a clear expectation without creating unnecessary room for negotiation. Second, toddlers can easily become overwhelmed or lose focus if a direction is too long or too complicated. So to make sure your toddler actually follows through, it's important to keep your directions short, simple, and clear. For example, instead of saying, please go to your bedroom, find your shoes and socks and put them on, simplify it to put your shoes and socks on. Similarly, instead of a vague direction like, Sarah, pick up your toys, be specific. Sarah, put your toys in the toy box. When you use clear, direct language like this, you make it easier for your toddler to understand exactly what you want them to do and then do it. And lastly, it's essential to make sure that your directions are age appropriate. So at around 18 months of age, most toddlers can handle a simple single step direction like pick up the ball. By the time they're 2, most toddlers can manage directions that consist of 2 closely related steps. So for example, it might be pick up the ball and then put it in the basket. At 3 years of age, most toddlers can follow 2 steps which are unrelated. So it might be throw the ball and then give me the teddy. And by 5, most children can manage directions that consist of 3 unrelated steps, such as put the ball in the box, grab your shoes, and then get in the car. As you can see, for your toddler to be able to successfully follow your directions, you need to make sure the directions you give match their developmental stage. So for example, my daughter is 2, so I only ever give her 2 steps that are related at a time. Now, since it can be hard to remember what's appropriate for each age, I've created a free communication milestone chart that outlines what you can typically expect from children starting at 12 months of age and going all the way up to 4 years of age. This will help you keep track of how many directions your little one should be able to follow and guide you in giving instructions that they can handle. To get your copy, just click the link in the description below. Okay, now that you know what to say, it's time to focus on the second component, which is how you say it. The most important aspect of how you give a direction is your tone. If your tone is too harsh or loud, like "Sam, pick up the ball," it can trigger your toddler's fight, flight, or freeze response, making them feel resistant, anxious, or even defensive. On the other hand, if your tone sounds uncertain, like "Sam, pick up the ball," it might confuse your toddler, making them think that they have a choice to say no or just ignore you. The key is to use a calm and confident tone, like "Sam, pick up the ball." This kind of tone communicates that you mean what you say, but in a way that feels safe and supportive, making it more likely that they'll actually follow through without pushback. It's also important to pair your tone with positive body language. So when you're giving directions, stay down at their eye level, maintain eye contact, and use simple gestures to make your directions even clearer. So for example, when I ask my toddler to put on her shoes, I say, "Put on your shoes," while I'm pointing to her shoes. A huge portion of human communication is non-verbal. So by combining body language with verbal communication, you're making it much easier for your little one to understand what you want them to do. Okay, so after you've given your toddler a direction, it's time for step 4, which is to just wait. And I mean really waiting for a full 7 to 10 seconds after you give that direction. And yes, this will likely feel like an eternity, especially when you're in the middle of a busy day. But your toddler's brain needs time to process the words they've just heard, understand what those words mean, plan out how to do what you're telling them, and then get their body to act. So we need to give them a full 7 to 10 seconds to do all of this. Now, at this point, your toddler is going to do one of 2 things. They'll follow your direction and do what you said. If so, that's great. It's a win. If they do, you want to make sure that you praise them right away, being specific in what you say. For example, you could say, "Wow, you put on your shoes all by yourself. Great listening." This kind of specific praise helps your toddler feel proud of what they're accomplished and encourages them to do the same thing again the next time. It also teaches them that following directions has a positive outcome, which builds their confidence and cooperation over time. And this praise step is actually step 5. Now, the other possible outcome is they don't do what you said. And if this happens, you would then repeat the direction, simplifying it if needed, and then guide them through the task. For example, if you originally said put the ball in the box, but they don't do it, you could then simplify it to pick up the ball while you're pointing to the ball to make it clearer. And if they still don't respond, you would then go one step further and actually help them complete each step. And this is step 6 of the process. Wow, that was a lot of steps. Okay, sticking with the example of putting the ball in the box. So you would first give the instruction, which is pick up the ball, and then you would gently place the ball in their hands. And then you would physically guide them over to the box. And then you would say, now put the ball in the box as you help them drop it in. Now, the important thing here is to still give that specific praise at the end, even if you help them. So for example, you might say, "You put the ball in the box, great listening." Guiding them like this and then praising their efforts helps them understand what's expected. And over time, this consistency will help them learn to follow directions on their own. So even if they struggle at first, you're building the skills they need to do it on their own in the future. Now at this point, I'd love to tell you that it's all smooth sailing from here. Just follow the 6 steps and they'll listen every single time without a problem. But as I'm sure you already know, that's never quite how it works with toddlers. Of course, there will still be challenges and times where they just don't want to cooperate. That's normal. They're little humans, not robots. One thing you're sure to run into at some point when giving your toddler directions is whining. Again, perfectly normal behavior for toddlers. But how you handle these moments has a big impact on how often they whine and how intense it gets. If you want to make sure that you're addressing whining in a way that's going to reduce how frequently it happens and not make it worse, and reduce how severe it gets, make sure you watch this video next, where I show you exactly how to respond when the whining begins and how to guide your toddler towards more positive ways of asking for what they want without all the complaining.